Okay, so one of the case studies that we've done in this course that a lot of you would remember is about a very famous leader and a very famous company right now in Elon Musk and Tesla. And so while we have Jakub here, we wanted to kind of like get his take on that case study and kind of re-explore this perspective or this crossover between sustainable finance and the way that companies are rated and the way that we kind of like measure these different types of metrics. Okay, so as I'm sure you don't need much of a reminder, but for those out there that would like one, basically if you recall, Tesla was initially put on an ESG rating and then eventually was taken off for various reasons, which made Mr. Musk not so happy. And he claimed that the whole concept of ESG ratings were, I believe the quote was BS. And as a result of that, claimed that the whole idea of ESG was maybe unnecessary and unhelpful from a finance perspective. Again, coming back to you, the questions that we asked at the time were around, or even the questions that Elon Musk had were, how can a company like Tesla, where the entire purpose is fairly environmental in nature, like moving away from the combustion engine into a cleaner type of vehicle, how could that possibly not be rated highly from an ESG perspective, certainly from a green finance perspective? But then beyond that, is there a risk that if we're only looking at how a company is operating and improving versus the core modus operandi or purpose of that business, if we're not, kind of assessing both those things, do we run the risk of people like Mr. Musk or just somebody from the general public thinking that ESG is kind of political BS where, it's this big government system that's trying to drive us towards a certain type of predefined definition of morality instead of something that's more objective, more financial in nature? What's your take on this?
Yeah, so I think many of us have heard about this particular case. Let me please not address the case directly, but
Sure.
speak about it more broadly, because also these things, they change in time, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so on. But maybe, first of all, why a company that is seemingly, good from an environmental point of view or even social point of view or it has a great governance even, why it can happen maybe that it will, let's say, have a low ESG rating, or it will not be included in one of the ESG indexes out there. So let us talk about that, right?
And just conversely, why a company that someone may perceive to not be very sustainable would rate very highly. So like, say, an oil and gas company, et cetera, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's also a good one. Looking at it from the other side of it. So yeah, let's talk about all of those. So let's start with why a seemingly good company, can have a low rating. So first of all, as it says, and if you are looking at this specific investment tool, ESG rating, as the name says, we would look at all three kind of, parts of it. So it's the environmental side of it, the social side, and the governance side. So we can have a company that has a great, product, let's say, as I said, one of the climate solutions, right? But if the other two pillars or even, anything else is not up to par, it will likely still not achieve a high rating, right? Because the rating is ultimately an average of all of these, relevant issues that we assess for the company, right? And I think that's for good reason. Because again, imagine that even if a company has an amazing climate or environmental product, right? So it can both, improve the world with its business and also, make good money for itself and its stakeholders. If, let's say, the company has really big problems with its workforce, as we mentioned, right? It has a high turnover, right? These things can materialize in issues with the company. It can disrupt production. It can reflect in the finances.
And just to point out, that was one of the specific things rating agencies did look at with Tesla, because at the time they felt that they were not properly addressing employee concerns. So just as a specific example.
Yeah, the same thing can be, as I mentioned. So workforce is kind of that inward-looking, social assessment. And when it comes to customers, again, the product can be amazing, but let's say if there are issues maybe with the safety of the product, so you have to do recalls and so on. Again, that's of course direct financial damage to the company or costs associated with doing these product recalls and fixing of the issues, and let's say even maybe facing some litigations, right? If maybe people got hurt or anything like this have happened. So this is another way why we also need to look at the other things rather than just, let's say, the environmental impact of the company's business. And also let me add finally maybe the governance side to it. Again, talking broadly, if we are seeing that the governance standards, which again are there to prevent conflicts of interest, maybe prevent these bad incidents happening in the company that can really disrupt the business model, like being accused and tried for anti-competitive practices or bribery or anything like this. This is, of course, another thing that we do need to take into account because, again, even if the company's product is both amazing for the environment and for the company's, top and bottom line, if any of these issues will materialize, as I mentioned, the government will say, okay, you cannot operate like this, you have broken, different rules of competition, right, and so on. That product will actually not help either the environment or the company, right? Because it will be all kind of maybe wiped out by all these other issues. So maybe the bottom line of what I wanted to say is that we cannot just focus on one area and completely disregard the others and say if the one is amazing, the company should also be regarded as good.
Yeah, and I think that's really a powerful reminder once again that ESG is not a prescribed, box tick type of list. It's not just about the environment, even though when we refer to ESG, I think for better or worse, a lot of people do currently tend to focus on the environmental side more than the others. But it's more of a comprehensive playbook whereby companies, markets, even countries can create sustainably profitable companies over the long run, right? And for the skeptics out there, and many times I fall in that same category from an ESG perspective, I think it's also a good example to show how influential and powerful these concepts can be because, again, using that Tesla example, they did very quickly, they were quite reactive and they made a lot of the changes that were recommended, and then the following year were put back on a lot of these ESG indices as a result. Now, again, you could argue that that's an external factor that's non-legal in nature, that is maybe inappropriately impacting that business and making them do things the way they don't want to do them. I would argue the opposite. I would say it shows that when you do have an aggregation of this type of data, it means that we, hopefully as a society, can have a little bit more influence in ensuring that our companies are not only creating great products, but also doing it in a way that's sustainable and healthy for all their stakeholders in society. So.
Exactly, and as you said, ultimately that should benefit both the company, its stakeholders, and perhaps the society and the environment.